Hello? I'm there. I'm live. I'm back. Anybody out there? Anybody stick it out with me? Hi. Well, I'm going to read a story even if nobody's out there. I know you may have given up on me. I haven't been present for a little bit, but I'm back. And I'm here to read a story for Frankenstein Tea. I'm going to have a little tea. Look at this cool teapot I found cleaning out the library the other day. It's nice, isn't it? So I put herbs in there and I put some hot water in there, and now I'm going to have some tea from it. Oh, hey, my dad says welcome back. Thanks, Dad. Welcome back to you. Yay, Dad, it's been a little bit of a haul. Haul was the word I just tried to say. Haul. It's been a little bit of a haul. I'm not sure how many people are on here, but I'll tell my dad because I posted it on the bulletin today. But Dad, we have somebody sick with COVID at the library. Stinks. So if anybody else is listening, you saw my bulletin post today and somebody is sick and we're closed again because of that. And we've all been tested. We're waiting for our test results. And I talked to the medical center twice yesterday about what's best, how to best proceed. And I will say that he feels pretty good about the rest of the staff, that this is day 7 of no contact with the sick person. We got lucky there with a holiday and time off and time away from each other and time when the building was closed. So day 7 of no symptoms, he's feeling pretty confident about that. We're certainly not out of the clear yet. We have longer to, sort of isolate ourselves in quarantine and wait for our test results. But that's my update, Dad. Yeah, good. That's good, right? Yeah. Whew. It's a tough one. But of course, we're very worried about our friend who is sick, our coworker. So, but I'll tell you about that later, Dad. Frankenstein Tea. Here we are, back at it. It is a short story program for adult listeners, which means that I usually read a story that has a swear in it or talks about sex or, some sort of adult theme or topic. I try to diversify this program with different writers and genres and time periods and different voice and, diversification. I tried to do that. I'm not very well prepared today, but I did read a story out of this book last week, and I read it to myself. I haven't read it to you yet, and let's see if I can find it. So this is John Cheever's The World of Apples. Let's see if I can remember what I read. Oh boy. I don't know if I can. Could be this one, Montraldo. See if I can find it. I don't want to read something totally cold. And this would be cold enough. I didn't read this story today. No, that's not what I read. But let's see. Oh, no, but this isn't what I read anyway. Let's see. Montraldo. Yeah, I read this last week and thought I would read it for the show. There's John Cheever's. Probably a long time ago, though. So let's start. This is The World of Apples. John Cheever. This book is so old. Look, it has the old, the due dates. That's kind of fun, huh? So old. Like, that's so long ago. It was published. The first publication is 1961. Alfred A. Knopf. 1961. John Cheever. This book was probably published in 1973, this edition. The story I'm going to read, Montraldo, was first appeared in the New Yorker. It doesn't say when. Oh, and maybe I'll read you 3 stories at another time. That first appeared in Playboy. That might be fun. See what they printed in Playboy. So this edition was published May 14th, 1973. And this is Montraldo. And I'm having a sip of my cool tea here. Okay, this is John Cheever. Sorry, I'm moving this to make sure you can hear me and see me. John Cheever's Montraldo. The first time I robbed Tiffany's, it was raining. I bought an imitation diamond ring at a costume jewelry place in the 40s. Then I walked up to Tiffany's in the rain and asked to look at rings. The clerk had a haughty manner. I looked at 6 or 8 diamond rings. They began at 800 and went up to 10,000. There was one priced at 3,000 that looked to me like the paste in my pocket. I was examining this when an elderly woman, an old customer, I guessed, appeared on the other side of the counter. The clerk rushed over to greet her, and I switched rings. Then I called, "Thank you very much. I'll think it over." "Very well," the clerk said haughtily, and I went out of the store. It was as simple as pie. I walked down to the diamond market in the 40s and sold the ring for 1,800. No questions were asked. Then I went to Thomas Cook and found that the Conte del Savina was sailing for Genoa at 5. This was in August, and there was plenty of space on the eastbound crossing. I took a cabin in first class and was standing at the bar when she sailed. The bar was not officially open, of course, but the barjack gave me a martini in a tumbler to hold me until we got into international waters. The Salvini had an exceptionally percussive whistle, and you may have heard it if you were anywhere near Midtown, although whoever is at 5 o'clock on an August afternoon. That night, I met Mrs. Winwar and her elderly husband at the horse races. He promptly got seasick, and we plunged into the marvelous skullduggery of illicit love. The past notes, the phony telephone calls, the affected indifference, and what happened when we were behind the closed doors of my cabin made my theft of a ring seem guileless. Mr. Winwar recovered in Gibraltar, but this only seemed like a challenge, and we carried on under his nose. We said goodbye in Genoa, where I bought a second-hand Fiat and started down the coast. I got to Montraldo late one afternoon. I stopped there because I was tired of driving. There was a semicircular bay set within high stone cliffs and one of those beaches that are lined with cafes and bathing houses. There were 2 hotels, a Grand and a National, and I didn't care for either one of them. And a waiter in a cafe told me I could rent a room in the villa on the cliff. It could be reached, he said, either by a steep and curving road or by a flight of stone steps. 127, I discovered later, that led from the back garden down into the village. I took my car up the curving road. The cliff was covered with rosemary, and the rosemary was covered with the village laundry, drying in the sun. There were signs on the door in 5 languages saying that rooms were for rent. I rang, and a thick-set, bellicose servant opened the door. I learned that her name was Assunta. I never saw any relaxation of her bellicosity. In church, when she plunged up the aisle to take Holy Communion, she looked as if she were going to knock the priest down and mess up the acolyte. She said I could have a room if I paid a week's rent in advance, and I had to pay her before I was allowed to cross the threshold. The place was a ruin, but the whitewashed room she showed me into was in a little tower, and through a broken window, the room had a broad view of the sea. The one luxury was a gas ring. There was no toilet, and there was no running water. The water I washed in had to be hauled out of a well in a leaky marmalade can. I was obviously the only guest. That first afternoon, while Assunta was praising the healthfulness of the sea air, I heard a querulous and elegant voice calling to us from the courtyard. I went down the stairs ahead of the servant and introduced myself to an old woman standing by the well. She was short, frail, and animated, and spoke such a flowery Roman that I wondered if this wasn't a sort of cultural or social dust thrown into one's eyes to conceal the fact that her dress was ragged and dirty. "I see you have a gold wristwatch," she said. "I, too, have a gold wristwatch. We will have this in common." The servant turned to her and said, "Go to the devil." "But it is a fact. The gentleman and I do both have gold wristwatches," the old lady said. "It will make us sympathetic." "Bore," the servant said. "Rot in hell." Thank you, treasure of my house, light of my life," the old lady said, and made her way toward an open door. The servant put her hands on her hips and screamed, "Witch, frog, pig." Thank you infinitely," the old lady said, and went in at the door. That night at the cafe, I asked about the signorina and her servant, and the waiter was fully informed. The signorina, he said, came from a noble Roman family, which she had been expelled because of a romantic and unsuitable love affair. She had lived as a hermit in Montaldo for 50 years. A santa had been brought here from Rome to be her donna di servizio. But all she did for the old lady these days was to go into the village and buy her some bread and wine. She had robbed the old woman of all her possessions. She had even taken the bed from her room, and she now kept her a prisoner in the villa. Both the Grand Hotel and the National were luxurious and commodious. Why did I stay in such a place? I stayed because of the view, because I had paid my rent in advance, and because I was curious about the eccentric old spinster and her cranky servant. They began quarreling early the next morning. A santa opened up with obscenity and abuse. The signorina countered with elaborate sarcasm. It was a depressing performance. I wondered if the old lady was really a prisoner, and later in the morning, when I saw her alone in the courtyard, I asked her if she would like to drive with me to Tambora, the next village up the coast. She said in her flowery Roman that she would be delighted to join me. She wanted to have her watch, her gold watch, repaired. The watch was of great value and beauty, and there was only one man she dared entrust it to. He was in Tambora. While we were talking, a santa joined us. "Why do you want to go to Tambora?" she asked the old lady. "I want to have my gold watch repaired," the old lady said. "You don't have a gold watch," a santa said. "That is..." Oh, shoot, sorry. Hold on. "You don't have a gold watch," a santa said. "That is true," the old lady said. "I no longer have a gold watch, but I used to have a gold watch. I used to have a gold watch, and I used to have a gold pencil." "You can't go to Tambora to have your watch repaired if you don't have a watch," a santa said. "That is true, light of my life, treasure of my house," the old lady said, and she went in at her door. I spent most of my time on the beach and in the cafes. The fortunes of the resort seemed to be middling. The waiters complained about business, but then they always do. The smell of the sea was riggish but unfresh, and I used to think with homesickness of the wild and magnificent beaches of my own country. Gayhead is, I know, sinking into the sea, but the sinkage at Montaldo seemed to be spiritual, as if the waves were eroding the vitality of that place. The sea was incandescent. The light was clear but not brilliant. The flavor of Montaldo, as I remember it, was immutable, intimate, depleted, everything I detest. For shouldn't the soul of a man be as limpid and cutting as a diamond? The waves spoke in French or Italian, now and then a word of dialect, but they seemed to speak without force. One afternoon, a remarkably beautiful woman came down the beach, followed by a boy of about 8, I should say, and an Italian woman dressed in black, a maid. They carried sandwich bags from the Grand Hotel, and my guess was that the boy lived mostly in hotels. He was pitiful. The maid took some toys from an assortment she carried in a string bag. They seemed to be all wrong for his age. There was a sand bucket, a shovel, some molds, a wiffle ball, and an old-fashioned pair of water wings. I suspected that the mother, stretched out on a blanket with an American novel, was a divorcee, and that she would presently have a drink with me in the cafe. With this in mind, I got to my feet and offered to play wiffle ball with the boy. He was delighted to have some company, but he could neither throw nor catch a ball. And making a guess at his tastes, I asked, with one eye on the mother, if he would like me to build him a sandcastle. He would. I built a water moat, then an escarpment with curved stairs, a dry moat, a crenellated wall with cannon positions, and a cluster of round towers with parapets. I worked as if the impregnability of the place was a reality, and when it was completed, I set flags made of candy wrappers flying from every tower. I thought naively that it was beautiful, and so did the boy. But when I called his mother's attention to my feet, she said, "Andiamo." The maid gathered up the toys, and off they went, leaving me, a grown man in a strange country, with a sandcastle. At Montraldo, the high point of the day came at 4 when there was a band concert. This was the largesse of the municipality. The bandstand was wooden, Turkish in inspiration, and weathered by the sea winds. The musicians sometimes wore uniforms, sometimes bathing suits, and their number varied from day to day, but they always played Dixieland. I don't think they were interested in the history of jazz. I just think they found some old arrangements in a trunk and were struck with them. The music was comical, accelerated. They seemed to be playing for some ancient ballroom team. Clarinet Marmalade, China Boy, Tiger Rag, Careless Love. How stirring it was to hear this old jazz explode in the salty air. The concert ended at 5 when most of the musicians packed up their instruments and went out to sea with the sardine fleet, and the bathers returned to the cafes and the village. Men, women, and children on a beach, band music, seagrass, and sandwich hampers remind me much more forcibly than classical landscapes of our legendary ties to paradise. So I would go up with the others to the cafe where, one day, I befriended Lord and Lady Rockwell, who asked me for cocktails. You may wonder why I put these titles down so breathlessly, and the reason is that my father was a waiter. He wasn't an ordinary waiter. He used to work at a dinner dance spot in one of the big hotels. One night, he lost his temper at a drunken brute, pushed his face into a plate of cannelloni, and left the premises. The union suspended him for 3 months, but he was, in a way, a hero. And when he went back to work, they put him on the banquet shift, where he passed mushrooms to kings and presidents. He saw a lot of the world, but I sometimes wonder if the world ever saw much more of him than the sleeve of his red coat and his suave and handsome face, a little above the candlelight. It must have been like living in a world divided by a sheet of one-way glass. Sometimes I am reminded of him by those pages and guards in Shakespeare who come in from the left and stand at a door, establishing by their costumes the fact that this is Venice or Arden. You scarcely see their faces. They never speak a line, nor did my father. And when the after-dinner speeches began, he would vanish like the pages on stage. I tell people that he was in the administrative end of the hotel business. But actually, he was a waiter, a banquet waiter. The Rockwells' party was large, and I left at about 10. A hot wind was blowing off the sea. I was later told that this was the sirocco. It was a desert wind and so oppressive that I got up several times during the night to drink some mineral water. A boat offshore was sounding its foghorn. In the morning, it was both foggy and suffocating. While I was making some coffee, Assunta and the signorina began their morning quarrel. Assunta started off with the usual pig, dog, witch, dirt of the streets. Leaning from an open window, the whiskery old woman set down her flowery replies. Dear one, beloved, blessed one, thank you, thank you. I stood in the door with my coffee, wishing they would schedule their disputes for some other time of day. The quarrel was suspended while the signorina came down the stairs to get her bread and wine. Then it started up again. Witch, frog, frog of frogs, witch of witches, etc. The old lady countered with treasure, light, treasure of my house, light of my life, etc. Then there was a scuffle, a tug of war over the loaf of bread. I saw Assunta strike the old woman cruelly with the edge of her hand. She fell on the steps and began to moan. Eee! Aye! Even these cries of pain seemed florid. I ran across the courtyard to where she lay in a disjointed heap. Assunta began to scream at me. I am not culpable! I am not culpable! The old lady was in great pain. Please, signor, she asked, please find the priest for me. I picked her up. She weighed no more than a child, and her clothing smelled of soil. I carried her up the stairs into a high-ceilinged room festooned with cobwebs and put her onto a couch. Assunta was on my heels, screaming, I am not culpable! Then I started down the 127 steps to the village. The fog streamed through the air, and the African wind felt like a furnace draft. No one answered the door at the priest's house, but I found him in the church, sweeping the floor with a broom made of twigs. I was excited and impatient. And the more excited I became, the more slow-moving was the priest. First, he had to put his broom in a closet. The closet door was warped and wouldn't shut, and he spent an unconscionable amount of time trying to close it. I finally went outside and waited on the porch. It took him half an hour to get collected, and then, instead of starting for the villa, we went down into the village to find an acolyte. Presently, a young boy joined us, pulling on a soiled lace soutane, and we started up the stairs. The priest negotiated 10 steps and then sat down to rest. I had time to smoke a cigarette. Then 10 more steps and another rest. And when we were halfway up the stairs, I began to wonder if he would ever make it. His face had turned from red to purple, and the noises from his respiratory tract were harsh and desperate. We finally arrived at the door of the villa. The acolyte lit his censer. Then we made our way into that ruined place. The windows were opened. There was sea fog in the air. The old woman was in great pain, but the notes of her voice remained genteel, as I expect they truly were. She is my daughter, she said. Assunta, she is my daughter, my child. Then Assunta screamed, Liar! Liar! No, 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 the old lady said. You are my child, my only child. That is why I have cared for you all of my life. Assunta began to cry and stamped down the stairs. From the window, I saw her crossing the courtyard. When the priest began to administer the last rites, I went out. I kept a sort of vigil in the cafe. The church bells tolled at 3, and a little later news came down from the villa that the signorina was dead. No one in the cafe seemed to suspect that they were anything but an eccentric old spinster and a cranky servant. At 4:00, the band concert opened up with Tiger Rag. I moved that night from the villa to the Hotel National and left Montraldo in the morning. So how'd you like that Yankee accent for that those Italian words? Villa, 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 right? Villa. Signorina, Signorina, not signora, not signorita, signorina. Just so you know, I'm saying it right. Signorina. Which other one did I stumble? Oh, acolyte, but I think that's right. All right, Little John Cheevers. I hadn't read John Cheevers before on the program, so there you have it. Assunta. Witch, frog, pig, daughter. Nice daughter, huh? Witch, frog, pig. Interesting. Okay, everybody, carry on. I'll be here tomorrow. Library is closed today. Closed tomorrow. Tomorrow's Thursday. Let's see what happens for Friday, but closed this afternoon and closed tomorrow. But we're still doing our virtual programs, and so tune in. We have Zoom story time coming up. No, Facebook story time coming up today at 4. We have In Our Kitchens coming up at 4 for Zoom. Dad, I sent you that link. If anybody on the program wants that link, send me an email. You have plenty of time to join in. Susan Stover is going to be making soup. Tomorrow we have 10:30 Zoom story hour. Frankenstein. We have Found Poetics at 2. That's been a great, interesting program. If anybody's curious about that, send me an email and I'll send you the link to that. We'd love to have you join. And then it's us again up at 3, Frankenstein Tea. All right, everybody, be well. Wear your mask. I made my mask yesterday from a pair of leggings. Kind of like it. This is my homemade mask. Wear your mask. Keep your distance. Rhode Islanders, you are on a pause. You are on a pause, Rhode Island. Stay put. Stay in your home as much as possible. You're on a pause. That's what I'm saying behind my mask. Stay home. Stay well. Okay. Peace.